Welcome to NG2, which happens to be my favourite tram stop in Nottingham. And you may ask, why do I like this tram stop? Well, within about half a kilometre of here there is some wonderful wildflowers, and particularly orchids. And I'm hoping possibly to find 4 different types of orchid here. We'll just see. There has been a drought for many months earlier in the year, so they may have adversely affected the orchids, but we'll have to see about that. And here's a really unusual form of broad-leaved willow herb here. I'm sure it is a broad-leaved willow herb because of its general shape and the type of flower that we have. And it's unusual because the leaves are quite small, even at the base of the stem, and you could hardly call them broad, but the flower is more or less the same as a usual broad-leaved willow herb. But there are a number of them here, all the same. So I assume it's a new species or a form of broad-leaved willow herb. Well, here's the first orchids I found on King's Meadow in NG2. And it's interesting, the flower sort of looks like a cross between an early marsh orchid and a southern marsh orchid. And there you can see it in close-up. I wonder what you think. The leaves are more like the form of a southern marsh orchid, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Now here's a plant that is very much like the common spotted orchids I found a couple of years ago here, and this is a large clump, and it may be a hybrid, but one of the ways you can tell a hybrid is by squeezing the stem and seeing if it's hollow. And this stem on this plant is very hollow, which probably means it's a cross between southern marsh orchid and common spotted orchid. That might explain its real extreme vigor. And I think this is one plant, and it would be, if it's a hybrid between common spotted and southern marsh, it would be a Grandees hybrid. And right next to that big clump of what I think is Grandees hybrids are a number of other plants that look more like fairly classic southern marsh orchids. They don't have any spots on the leaves at all here. Nice to see them doing well though. There's a good number of these plants. Yeah, obviously southern marsh orchid here. And here are a good number of plants of various shades of pink, and this one has got spots on the leaves, and it looks like a fairly standard common spotted orchid, though the leaves are a bit of a funny shape. I wouldn't like to commit myself on that one. But over here we've got some more, and these plants don't have any spots on the leaves at all, and they're fairly typical southern marsh orchid. And another one here. I should point out, by the way, the huge numbers of these broad-leaved willow herbs that are coming up among the orchids, and they've all willow herbs are extremely common on this site of different kinds. Now this plant is definitely derived from common spotted orchid. It's got very strongly spotted leaves, but the flowers don't look quite right to me. Maybe they are, maybe this is just a normal common spotted orchid. Let's focus in on the flowers a bit. Yeah, probably a common spotted orchid. And we've got another one here. Again, with spots on the leaves. Common spotted orchid, I reckon. But there is clearly a mix of plants on this site, common spotted and southern marsh, which are clearly integrating with each other, no doubt about that. Now here's a plant that I would definitely say is a common spotted orchid. It looks much more typical of common spotted orchid flower. It's got spots on the leaves. It's got a solid stem, so I'm pretty sure, yeah, this is a typical common spotted orchid found on this site. Right next to that we've got quite a large number of darker pink orchids, many of which have spotted leaves, many of which don't. And this one is a fairly typical common spotted orchid, I think. I'll just press the stem to see if it's hard. Yep, it's hard, so this is probably a typical common spotted orchid. And just home in on the flowers for you there. Now this one I'm not too sure about. It's got very, very, very broad leaves at the base with spots, and if you look at the flowers you can see they're fairly typical of common spotted orchid, but they may have a bit of southern marsh orchid in them. Just home in on them for you. Not sure about this one, but the leaves seem far too broad for it to be a typical common spotted orchid. Yeah, I'm sure of that. And just to give you a panoramic view of these plants growing together, various shades of pink, and there's a good number of them this year. I've obviously come at the right time. The common spotted orchids growing among them are clearly easily separated by their size and appearance, and they're much paler in colour, some of them almost white, and I'll show you one of those. Now this one's much smaller, but if you look at the leaves you can see the definite spotting on them, even though it doesn't have many leaves to look at. If you go up the stem you can see the flowers are very pale, almost white, with pink striations on them. Very nice this one, but very small. Just to round off, show you this group here. A wonderful group of orchids. Many, I'm sure, are hybrids between southern marsh and common spotted. You can find some southern marsh and common spotted here. The unusual thing, I suppose, about marsh orchids is it's very dry, this site. It hasn't had much rain this year, but they're still coming up and they're still vigorous plants, possibly because they're in the shade of trees and are overgrown by herbaceous plants, particularly rose bay willow herb, which seems to be protecting them. Anyway, that's all for the orchids of Kings Meadow and NG2. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.